Hello, my name is Chariot, and oh my god, it's finally happened. It's time for the Slaanesh, the Demons of Slaanesh range review for Warhammer 40k. Let's just go straight into it, because this is a solid range. This is going to be 99% gushing about how good these designs are, right? This is my favourite. This is just my flat out favourite for quite a few reasons. There's a couple of models in here that just stand out head and shoulders above everything else, in my opinion. And the first one is this Keeper of Secrets right here, which is hands down my favourite Greater Demon. I love this Keeper of Secrets. It has everything. It's got this skimpy kind of sensual clothing that one might, attribute to Slaanesh, but also it's got a weird kind of almost bovine cow face, horrible claws, a really nice, really very fancy, shiny sword with an interesting shape, but still looks actually kind of functional, which is nice. It's got 4 arms with massive claws. The cloak, loved painting the cloak on mine, absolutely loved it. It's such a good model. It is such a good model. There is no part of it I don't like. It's still it's got different bits of the most desirable body form kind of thing going on, but at the same time it's super otherworldly. It's really creepy. There's loads of very distinctly human attributes to it, but then you've got even things like stuff that you would typically find on a kind of a stylized painting of a human of some form, right down to the clothing and stuff. But then you've got these weird backwards jointed legs. I think it's digigrade legs. And the shape of the shoulders is normal until you look up and realise there's a second set of shoulders on top of that, both of which are the lower ones are kind of more lithe than heavily muscled, but the upper ones, the shoulders at least, seem to be more heavily muscled than the ones that are lower down. There's just so much going on. It is creepy and weird. It's got so many nice little details, all the little gems and kind of bits of decoration hanging down. The metal that goes over the claws is... I love it. It looks so good. And of course, it's got lots of different weapons options as well. You've also got the name version, Shalaxi Hellbane, which is... yeah, sure. It's not the worst name. It's also not the best either. I have to admit, that's my least favourite head out of all of them. That's not... That one just doesn't quite do it for me. It looks a bit too angry. I kind of like the more calm expression on some of their heads, because it just adds to that adds to the otherworldly weirdness of it. The more bovine head is fine, but there's too much of the bull about the nose. I think really the favourite head has got to be that one, because there's still some very kind of... It's got very chiseled cheekbones. It's quite human on the sides, but then the centre is very, very animalistic. It's just a really cool contrast. I think they've done just a really good job with this. Genuinely, I think it's one of my favourite models they've done, because it kind of embodies all the different things that should be embodied when it comes to Slaanesh. Slaanesh is a bit of a weird one, because as the god of excess covers everything. It covers everything. It covers gluttony, it covers greed, it covers lust, it covers loads of different things. But it's very hard to represent that in model form, having something that kind of embodies all of that. And there's a lot about it that's kind of draped in finery, and there's a lot about it that kind of just hints to things that aren't just the sex approach that you get, frankly, from a lot of the older Slaanesh stuff. Slaanesh is more than that. This kind of, to me, feels like one of those steps away where there's just little nods to other stuff going on. And you know what, in a kind of similar vein, there's Seal-esque, the Vengeful Alliance, whatever you want to call it. This, again, is a really, really good model. I think they've done a really good job with the design of this. So, you've got a Demonet on top, you've got a Demon Prince style lad down the bottom there, and there's a really nice kind of combination of styles. There's nothing kind of overtly over-sexualized about this. Instead, this looks more like just the pursuit of perfection in form. So you've got nice kind of flowing armour on the lower legs. You've got all these kind of scarification marks across the chest and the shoulder. Very precisely done. It's clearly supposed to flow in a certain way. And it's a design that is, you can kind of see just about that it's symmetrical across both sides. This is like a pursuit of perfection thing, which again is another aspect that just needs to be shown more in models, because it's all part of the same god. I have to admit, I find the posing to be a little bit awkward. That's my only kind of thing I don't like about it. I do like the overall silhouette, but I just feel like there's something about just one model being on top of the other that kind of loses some of the grace and the kind of poise of it. But that's just me. I know plenty of people who absolutely love the way this has been designed. And the thing is, I like each individual character. I like both of them. I just am not sure about having one directly over the top of the other. It kind of creates a not necessarily pleasing to the eye silhouette for me, but it is very distinctive. So there is that. It's not like it fails at standing out, because it achieves that. But yeah, it's just not quite to my taste, all of that. But individually, the characters look great. And I do like this kind of winged contraption on the back there. It adds a lot of presence to the model. Now, next up we have the Demonets, which are kind of... I don't think they're not like massively old, I don't believe, but they are getting on a little bit at this point. Overall, I think the design of them is fine. They look alright. They are, however, very spindly. Like, I've put together quite a few Demonets at this point, and they're a little frustrating to put together. There's some very small contact points for the arms and stuff, and the claws are really small. Like, I don't know how many times I've lost a claw or dropped one and just can't find it again, which it just makes assembly frustrating when you've got like loads of really fiddly bits, you know? The design of them is nice enough. I think the heads are some of the strongest parts of the Demonets. There's a really nice variety of different like hairstyles and shapes, and it really kind of makes them look... It kind of breaks them up a bit on the tabletop. They don't all look the same, which is nice. I know, obviously, you know, if you're doing a significant force of them, you're going to have repeated hairstyles, but the fact you can mix and match different claws and stuff like that, it does make quite a big difference as to each model ending up feeling a bit more unique. The nice differences between some of them having like normal legs as well, and some of them having more of that like digigrade look to the legs is I think a nice touch that doesn't often get remarked on. It adds a bit of variety, a little bit of difference between the different models. In terms of like just how weird they look, I quite like it, because they are, you know, there's a distinctly kind of humanoid feel to them, but there's those odd bits of just animal-like weirdness going on. The claws specifically, but also the legs to a lesser extent. The fact that there's like a very feminine silhouette, but then when you get close, they're not right anatomically. You know, there's like bits missing, there's extra bits that you wouldn't expect. It's just a very good execution of that sort of thing. I wouldn't say they're quite as like ethereal or otherworldly as say the Keeper of Secrets is. I think they're a bit more standard than that in a weird way, but at the same time, when it comes to having a shed load of infantry, they do have like a nice kind of strong profile that you can easily see what they are, which is nice, to be honest. I'm trying to remember which... It's the Death Guard stuff. The Death Guard stuff has an issue for me where it all kind of blurs into an overcomplicated blob from too far away. This doesn't really ever suffer from that issue. There's lots of like nice, sharp, pointy bits all over the place. You can just easily make out what's what and from where. Now, we also have the Seekers of Slaanesh. Now, these are getting on a bit, like, by this point. They're just not... They're not quite up to scratch for me. I think these were redone at the same time as the Demonets, to be fair, but for some reason these feel like they've aged a little bit worse. I mean, you can see from the sprue just how old these are now. I mean, how much wasted space do you need? It's crazy how bad some of these older sprues were. Like, that, there's so much wasted space on some of these, it's just unreal. Can you imagine opening a box of like a new kit now and finding like that amount of empty? You'd wonder what the hell happened to half of the box, wouldn't you? They look okay. I will say the newer like Hedonites of Smesh that have got like I think it's just mortals on Seekers. They look a lot more interesting. I feel like the Seekers themselves look a lot more developed, and they have more personality and they're a bit more well done. They've obviously, you know, learned over time, as you do when you know, making this kind of thing. They do have like a bit of charm of their own, but I think overall it's mostly the mounts. It's the mounts and the kind of static poses that aren't doing them any favours. They don't look bad, but they don't look like they're doing anything. They are all kind of just... They all have their arms relatively close to the body, or like with the claws just facing forward. There's no kind of outstretched, there's no kind of leaning. The legs are all very static, hung off to the side. It doesn't look like they're gripping with the legs either. It just looks like they're resting on the mount. They're just lacking that kind of movement and that motion, and they're lacking just life in general. They look a bit lifeless, which is a pity, because I don't think the same can be said for the Demonets. There's not like a vast array of poses, and they are perhaps a little static, but there's enough variety and there's enough movement there that they look more in motion and more as though they're actually doing something than these do. These look very just static, really. I don't think it's enough for just the mount to look like it's moving. I think the rider needs to look like they're moving as well, and these just don't look like that. By contrast, though, you got the new Fiends, which look fantastic, because they are just absolutely... They're just out there, weird, mad creatures. I mean, little details like the fact that the legs at the back are on backwards. I mean, that's just a really cool detail. It's not something that I don't think I really picked up on it initially when I first saw these, but the fact that the legs are on this thing in such a way that it looks like they've been kind of like fused in the middle of the body, because the back legs are just fully on backwards. It's something that looks like it shouldn't work, but it obviously does because it's running towards you. The fact that the legs also have like stockings on them, which is super weird, because these are just... They look just like animals, but they've got humanoid features. That is why I think you've got like the nudity on these that you don't have on the Demonets. The Demonets are distinctly humanoid-looking figures, and so when you put something like that kind of nudity on there, it kind of elevates them to being like more explicit in a way. When it's something like this, when it's a creature this just bizarre and creepy, it just makes it more bizarre and creepy, but doesn't necessarily add any more of like a sexual element to it, I guess. They're just so weird. They're so weird. They're just really off. Everything about them is off. The fact that they've got actual like bits of clothing on it's just not right. You've got these kind of long seeker-esque faces which just look horrendous, especially with the long tongue sticking out. It's really gross. The fact you've got humanoid arms leading to the massive crab claws, but this is on a four-legged beast with a tail, except two of the legs are back to front. They're just so weird. They're so weird and just outright disturbing in their design, which I really like. I really like how weird they are. I think they do a great job with these, because they're just unsettling. They're unsettling creations. And I'd love to see more stuff like this. And yeah, just to give a brief... like, look at that sprue, right? And then look at that. It's such a good indicator as to how old something is. Hardly any wasted space. 90% wasted space. But yeah, the Fiends are fantastic. They're so good. Some of the best designs they've done for Slaanesh, honestly. Following on from them, we have the Herald of Smesh, which is older. But I thought we'd get this one out of the way in terms of the characters that were available to the 40k Slaanesh Demons force. It's fine. It's actually not too bad in terms of pose. Maybe a little bit static. A weird pose. I'm not sure whether it's a signal to move forward, whether it's like a challenge, or whether she's just doing a dance. Could just be doing a dance. Who knows? It's not bad. It's not bad. There is some nice detail on there. The fact that you've got one claw that is entirely like what's the name of like the kind of like chitin, I think it is, that like crab shells and stuff are made out of. That's just that, but the other one's got some armor on. It's quite nice. I like the contrast there. The cloth on this model is also really good. Like the kind of drapes hanging off the back. It looks really nice. And I will say this one's painted pretty decently too. Overall it's pretty decent, but if I remember correct, this is resin. We will just double check that right now, because I'm 90%. Yeah. So finely detailed resin kit, 4 components, so wouldn't be too much of a nightmare to put together. Getting on a bit, but honestly, I don't think all that bad, really. The mask, on the other hand, is a good model. It's a good model. I like the mask a lot. For a start, the idea of it, the kind of theme of it, is really nice. There's a bit of a Harlequin feel to it, which is fun. The masks on the stick are really nicely done as well. The way that she looks like she's dancing with it is a really nice touch. Yeah, overall this is a pretty good model. I'm never sure about like the ruff around the neck. I'm never sure about that, but that's just because I just don't like those on anything, which I know is a weird thing to say because it's a historic thing. It's a thing that did exist and people had ruffs for however many years. But every time I see one, even in like a period piece where that is supposed to be what they're supposed to wear, part of me just looks at it and goes, why did everyone wear that? It looks terrible. Like, it just looks really stupid. The thing is, that's not the fault of this model. That's just a personal dislike of something that, to me, just looks crap. But again, if you're going for a certain theme and you are kind of going for like almost like a Shakespearean sort of look to things, having that on there totally makes sense, and I do get it. But that's just one of those weird kind of irrational things where, you know, even in something where it makes sense to have that, like on TV shows or films, someone's in a ruff, I just don't. It just looks terrible to me, and it makes sense that it's on there, but that doesn't mean I have to like it in a weird way. It's like, I like the inclusion because it's a cool thing to put on there. It's like a cool reference. But on the other hand, I also don't want it on there because I don't like it, which is incredibly, like, the cognitive dissonance is off the charts. But I guess it's similar to when you see something and you go, you know what, that's absolutely hideous, but I love it anyway. Just that sort of thing. This one, however, I have not got a bad word about. The Infernal Enrapture S, which is not a good name, but is a good model, I absolutely love. It's got everything. It's got everything. There's a significant amount of body horror going on. The fact that this poor guy is arched, like, arms up and back, the harp has been rammed into his flesh and it's growing, like his flesh is starting to grow over it. All the tendons being used as harp strings. The fact the harp is still metal on the top, so the weight of it must be horrific. It's awful. Absolutely gross. Just all around terrible. It's, whoever came up with this, you need Jesus. What the hell? I love it. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, it's super grim. It's super, super grim. And I think it's one of the best Slaanesh sculpts they've done, by far. To be honest, I don't even... The Demonet playing it, absolutely fine, decent looking model. I think this is one of those ones where the star of it isn't even the demon who is playing it. The most important part of this model isn't the Demonet. The Demonet is like an incidental detail to the harp that has been, you know, rammed into this guy's messed up arms and hands. That's the important bit. Things like the symbol of Slaanesh being carved into the back, like the skin has been stripped away to form the symbol. It's so good. It's so good. I think you could have stuck any Demonet on there and it would have looked fine because I mean, look at it. I will say things like the horns on the Demonet and the hair as well, those are a nice touch because there's a little bit of mirroring going on. So on the harp itself, you've got these kind of spiked, kind of bladed sections pointing up, which you also have on the Demonet with the horns coming out of the head. There's also that kind of flowing curve at the top of the harp, which is not quite mirrored exactly, but is kind of hinted at in the shape of the hair as well. There's some nice kind of symmetry going on, which I really do like. I think they've done a good job with it, but my attention always just goes straight to like the body horror aspect of it, because again, it's so gruesome. It's pretty like severe even for 40k, it's fairly graphic. It's not something that I think we have a lot of in terms of model form, where it's just kind of like that kind of explicit, I guess. It is fully just a depiction of a mortal person, a human, in eternal agony for the sake of playing music. Like, it's pretty grim, you know? And it's also just absolutely fantastic because of it. Just look at it. It's so good. The detail is great. The detail is so nice. Oh, terrible. Oh. Let's move on. Let's go on to the last thing, which is the Seeker Chariot, which you can also build an Exalted Seeker Chariot out of by just taking 2 of these kits and ramming them together. It's okay. It's alright. It's a bit fiddly, it's a bit spindly, it doesn't look like it would survive an impact with anything, to be honest. It really doesn't look like it would be able to take any sort of a hit from even running over someone, to be honest. It's just a bit kind of frail. One of those things where I think the idea is solid, but the execution is just a bit lackluster, I guess. Also, awful to put together. I've put together an Exalted Chariot, and it's just an absolute chore. It's one of the least enjoyable kits that I've ever assembled. Like bar none, it's one of the least enjoyable. It just is tedious like you wouldn't believe, which, to be honest, really sours my perception of it. Like, I'm not going to lie. This is one where it's like, obviously all of this stuff is subjective. None of it is really objective, but this is one of those ones where I actively dislike this because of having to put one together, where I just hated it so much that seeing it kind of reminds me of just faffing around with tiny, fiddly, annoying parts for what felt like an eternity, only to end up with something that I just wasn't a big fan of to begin with anyway. Yeah. And it's kind of hard to let that go, to be honest, when it comes to the Seeker Chariot and the Exalted Seeker Chariot. But then again, this is the only thing out of this particular range that I have that sort of reaction to. Everything else is pretty decent, maybe getting on a bit, maybe a bit too static, but there are some absolutely standout models here. I mean, like, the Fiends are amazing. The Infernal Enrapture S is like, it's a top 10 model for me, personally, just in general. Like, these two, again, it might not be 100% to my taste, having that particular kind of pose to them, but I just can't help but like the model. And then, you know, you got the Keeper of Secrets, which is just my favourite created demon of all of them. It just is. There's no... They'd have to do something pretty damn solid to shift it off that top spot, to be honest. So there you go. That is the Slaanesh range for Warhammer 40k. Anything in there that stands out to you? Anything you absolutely love? Or any other thing that you just really don't like? Have you put together a Seeker Chariot, and was it also terrible for you? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that stuff. Click it if you like. Don't click if you don't want to. And as always, there's an affiliate link in the description for Element Games, which you can use to support the channel if you would like. I leave it in your capable hands. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.